All right, guys. So our next session is with Dr. Garth Davis. It is called Plant Proteins, What You Should Know. A few things about the doctor. He has been practicing for 24 years. He is board certified in medical and surgical weight loss. He's got a practice in Houston. He's written a book about weight loss surgery and a book called Proteinaholic, if I said that correctly. And he's got a third book. Please welcome the doctor.
It's always hard after the lunch because everybody's falling asleep, but that healthy lunch, I think probably everybody's doing okay, right? Not going to sleep on me. I'll try to make it interesting. Let's see. Are the slides loaded? It's not, the clicker's not clicking. Oh, there we go. Now let's go backwards. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a very interesting topic that I have been studying for many years. And I didn't obey my greatest law right here, which is, I saw this meme once and it just fit with me perfectly because I argued so much with people. Go to these nutrition meetings and we argue. You saw me arguing with oatmeal, which I should have done this, when you argue with someone, it just makes your blood pressure go up. But I think you guys need to see the different perspectives because there are different perspectives. And in nutrition, there's tons of conversation. And Dr. Tro and I have been going to different conferences. We have completely different views on nutrition, but we both want our patients to do the best. And that's what really matters. But I do want to give you guys a different perspective because I really feel like I am agnostic when it comes to nutrition. But I do think that we overemphasize protein. And in fact, I sell a protein powder, which is kind of hypocritical. So that's one of my conflicts of interest, but that's more as a meal replacement. But if anything, I will tell you that you probably don't need protein powders, all right? Now, my other conflict of interest is I am vegan. And so you guys are then saying, oh my God, he's vegan. He's going to be this preachy vegan guy who's about to tell you about all the bad things. And, that's really not true. I became vegan because I learned about the benefits of plant-based protein for my health and the health of my patients, and the benefit of plant-based protein for the earth and the animals. And so I'm not biased because I'm vegan because of what I learned. And, there's all kinds of reasons you might want to choose a plant-based diet. A huge study came out called the Eat Lancet study. And what they wanted to do is look at all the literature about food, how it affects our health, and how it affects the environment. And the Eat Lancet study looked at how much water we use for different food products, and how much land, and how much CO2, and what would be the healthiest diet to prevent this. They also looked at the fact that we used to be mainly wild animals. Now there's almost no wild animals. Do you know that we kill 70 billion animals a year to feed 8 billion people, which is kind of crazy, right? When you think about we're making a middleman out of it. And so they came out and they said that we need to do a predominantly plant-based, not vegan diet, but a predominantly plant-based diet. We need to eat a lot less meat if we're going to do that to help our health and help the environment. Now, what you got to understand is that money does talk in nutrition, okay? I went and gave a talk at the USDA when they were coming up with their food plate, and it was like 4 doctors and just a room full of lobbyists. And when the Eat Lancet study was coming out, we've now uncovered that there was have you guys heard of beef checkoff? So the beef industry actually has a marketing agency, and they were all over the place getting influencers to start texting and coming up with responses before the study even came out. And they looked back at, if you look at the studies that show, for instance, that meat is good for your heart, 100% of the studies that show that meat is good for the heart was funded by the meat industry. Now, if it's not funded by the meat industry, what percentage of studies show that meat is good for the heart? 0. All right, so there's a difference between 0 and 100%. It's got to make you think for a second. All my life, and I'm sure with you guys too, because I used to go to bariatric surgery meetings. The interesting thing about bariatric surgery meetings, especially in the early days, because I've been around a while now, and in the very early days, we would go into the meetings just like this. We would be there for a week to discuss weight loss surgery. We wouldn't talk about nutrition. There was one nutritional piece of advice we're supposed to give our patients, and what is that? Eat protein. That's all we ever heard. Number one health tip you get. And in America, we've listened, right? We've listened to this fact. We eat, and this is worldwide, protein consumption has gone up and up and up. And we basically lead the world in amount of protein per capita. And not only do we lead the world in the amount of protein per capita, but we're also eating the most amount of animal protein. So we're fulfilling our goal to eat more protein, right? And how's it working for our health? Now, this is a univariate analysis, right? You'll see people do this, right? You'll see, one variable, how much protein we eat, and another variable, when do we die? That's not very accurate. But what I'm trying to say is that we're eating a lot of protein, and it isn't making us healthier necessarily, right? We're not living a long time. In fact, we're living one of the shortest life expectancies of civilized societies. We spend more money of our GDP on health than places that have free health care, that have government-based health care. We're still more expensive than how much we spend, and yet we get less bang for the buck. We've got obesity trends that are going up and up and up, and we lead the world in how much we weigh, but also in how much diabetes we have, and also in how many cancers we have. So we are not a very healthy culture to look at. We also consume the most amount of medications than any other country in the world. So something's going on. Where do we get this idea that protein is important? Protein, from the Latin word proteus, meaning important. Dr. Joseph Liebig, right here, looking fairly stern, did some studies, looked at skin, looked at muscle. What's it made of? Protein. So what should we eat? Protein. And so he decided, because we're made of protein, we need to eat protein. And he came up with this beef tea, which sounds disgusting, but I guess it's like bone broth. Tallow. What? Oh, yeah, they do. They sell beef tallow. That's the fat of it. This was actually like a tea, like it was a ground up, like a tea, like a bone broth, yeah. And it sold like crazy, but people started getting sick from it, which was interesting. People were getting sick from the beef tea. Carl von Voigt was the next person to kind of rise protein up, because what he did is he looked at workers, and he said, what are they eating? And whatever they're eating must be what we should be eating, and they were eating fairly high protein levels. But it was interesting, back then, if you got overweight, it was actually a sign of being successful. And so people didn't really care. We really weren't that concerned about our protein consumption. There were people like Dr. Chittenden from Yale who said, well, maybe we're eating too much protein. He started noticing people getting sick from protein, and he took a bunch of boxers and did one of the first randomized controlled trials where he gave them only 70 grams of protein, and they lost weight and they were really healthy. But no one was really listening because nobody really cared that much. This is a New York Times article from 1910, cancer increasing amongst meat eaters. But things didn't really change until we really started eating more meat. In order to eat a lot of meat, you got to be able to produce a lot of food for the meat. And how do we do that? Industrial farming, right? And industrial farming changed everything. We no longer got our food from ma and pa, right? We got it from big companies. And it wasn't just meat that was making us overweight. It was everything. We were eating processed foods now. So in the 1970s, the Senate Select Committee on Nutrition wanted to know, why are we getting overweight? Funny enough, it started out with, what are we going to do about malnutrition and underweight? And they were like, oh my God, we don't have that. So let's focus on why are we overweight and why are we getting heart disease? And this committee got together and they looked at just about everything there was. When it came to nutrition, this went on forever. It was really a big deal in the news. And they concluded that we eat too much meat, too much dairy, too much eggs, and too much sugar. And we need to eat a more natural diet. Now, this didn't go over well with the meat industry, the dairy industry, the egg industry, and the sugar industry. And they made sure that the chair of the committee, McGovern, like it turns out if you come from North Dakota and say don't eat meat, you get voted out of North Dakota. And they started lobbying. And it's interesting, the recommendation went from eat less meat to eat more lean, lower fat meat. And all of a sudden, a very important thing happened. We stopped talking about food as food. We started talking about macronutrients. All of a sudden, it's not meat, it's protein. All of a sudden, it's not chips, it's carbs and fat. And all of a sudden, it just wasn't about food. Dietitians stopped talking about food. They don't tell you, eat this or eat that. They say, I need you to eat this much protein, I need you to eat this much carbs. Well, what's pizza? Is that a carb? Everybody calls it a carb, but it's got more calories from fat than it does carbs. So is it a fat or is it a carb? What's a donut? Oh, that's a carb. No, it's not. It's fat, except if you're eating the protein donuts. Don't eat the protein donuts at a protein talk. And then, of course, what happens, right? They say, okay, now the recommendation became eat low fat. So Snackwell's and Oreo, like, all right, well, this is reduced fat. These are vegan. You can eat an Oreo cookie. Does that make us healthier? No, it doesn't make us healthier. The funny thing is people say the low-fat craze failed. But guess what? We never went low-fat. We actually ate more fat when we went low-fat. We just ate more of everything. We ate Snackwell cookies, so we got more processed food, and we ate more fat, and we ate more protein. You know what we didn't eat more of? Look up there, fruits and vegetables. That we didn't increase, but we increased just about everything else. And these are kind of a look. So, instead of talking about macronutrients, look at what we're eating. We actually did drop our beef consumption, by the way. But you know what we've eaten more of, what has just soared through the roof? Chicken. We are eating tons and tons and tons of chicken. You can see the huge increase in chicken. But so this changed everything. In the nutrition world, people just started talking about carbs versus fat. Let's debate carbs versus fat. And the studies were pretty neutral. Low-carb diets seemed to do just as well as low-fat diets, and it seemed to be either one or the other, depends on who you were talking to. Are you talking to Dr. Troy or are you talking to me? But in the background, what was happening is that we were putting protein on a pedestal. We were saying, okay, it's either carbs are bad or either fat's bad, but then protein's got to be good, right? Protein has got to be the thing that saves us. And Atkins loved this, right? He said, let's eat a high-protein diet. Obviously, it came with a lot of side effects and a lot of problems, but we liked it because we kind of lost weight with it, or did we? How successful was Atkins long-term? Not successful at all. How successful was he himself? Who died at 72 of heart disease, weighing 280 pounds by the autopsy report. There were people that countered this, all right? So Nathan Pritikin was a gentleman who was diagnosed with heart disease in the 1950s. He didn't have any treatment for it. He decided that the answer was the opposite of Atkins, a very high-carb, high-fiber, whole-food, plant-based diet. When he died, he dedicated his heart to science. They dissected his heart at Johns Hopkins, and they showed that he did not one drop of heart disease left in his heart. It all went away. And there were people like this guy, Walter Kempner. Do you guys know who this is? He had the most successful diet. This was before we had any treatment for diabetes. You got diabetes, you died. You got high blood pressure, you would die. If you were overweight, you died. He was the only person treating it. It was in the 1940s and 1950s. He had a place at Duke. People came from all over the world. Still, if you go to Duke, you could go and find the neighborhoods because they would live there to be treated by Dr. Kempner. And what diet did he do that cured all these problems? Anybody know? Rice diet. Nothing but rice. Nothing but rice and fruit cured diabetes? Rice. Nothing but white rice, too. We're not even talking brown rice. It was white rice and fruit. Now, unfortunately, he got his license taken away because if you ate anything but rice and fruit, he would whip you with a whip. So in his defense, he said that people asked for that, but he lost his license and the rice diet went away. But there's a problem, and that is marketing. Marketing was very big, and there was a lot of money in agriculture, and there's a lot of money in beef. And in beef, they had the national checkoff. You can see that there at the bottom. I'm kind of red light blind, so I can't even see where that is. But anyway, and what they found is that a lot of marketing really got people to change the way they looked at food. And they started looking at protein as, first of all, something of affluence, something affordable, became something of a luxury, and it became something equated with muscle. And we start seeing all these commercials about people buying out there. You could even buy vodka with protein in it and think that you're going to look like him because you got vodka with protein in it. And it's all this idea, right, that if you're going to eat the protein, just by eating the protein, you're going to develop muscle, right? If you get the amino acids in, you're going to develop muscle. You should start your day with protein. Don't start it with oatmeal. Or you could have a Fiber One bar because it's got protein in it, so it's got to be good for you, right? Or even like the vegan things, silk soy milk is like, well, wait, but we got protein. Do you think protein wants to be in all these things? I like that meme. This one I thought was really funny. Every day we inch closer to protein vape being real. I know someone out there in the lab is giving rats a new type of cancer trying to figure it out. It is funny that we want protein in everything. If you go down the aisles, it's protein, 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 and it's all part of this kind of bro science, I call it. Like if you drink this protein shake, you're going to look like this guy, which you won't, right? And I don't know what's going on with him. He didn't work out his legs, I guess, so he's the protein's only working on his upper body, not his lower body. All right, embarrassing picture, but this is me. I believed everything about protein back then. I ate tons of protein and a lot of protein. I thought it was all you could eat. I went on keto diets, and I just couldn't seem to get muscle. I went to medical school in the medical center, which is this big, large place. We did take the Hippocratic Oath when we become a doctor, but we never say what Hippocrates actually said, which is let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. That wasn't part of our Hippocratic Oath. We sat there in classes for many, many hours. Did we study nutrition? No, we really didn't. We studied to sell. This doesn't really apply much to my daily doctoring at this point, but that's what we studied. We really didn't study nutrition, and it took me many years of study to understand how nutrition was affecting my patients. When I first came out and started practicing weight loss surgery, and I had very black hair, I wrote a book being The Expert's Guide to Weight Loss Surgery, which is always funny to me now because I was not an expert I was wet behind the ears there. And in this book, I told people they got to eat a lot of protein. 30% of your calories needs to be protein. That's what I said back then. Because I thought protein was everything, but quite honestly, I didn't really even think it mattered. I didn't really think diet mattered. I know that sounds weird to you, but back then to me, like I said, I was a surgeon, and I just thought, the body's broken. We were dealt a lemon. And my body, my role is to take this knife and fix that lemon, right? I'm a mechanic. You bring it in broken, I'm going to fix it. I don't care what gas you're putting in it. I'm going to fix this car. But then I start looking at all my patients. Everybody's got high blood pressure. And there's people with sleep apnea and heart disease and diabetes and cancer. And everybody's got a bellyache and everybody's constipated. And everybody is struggling to lose weight. And it's not like my patients were eating badly. They were eating the same things I was eating. And so it made me start thinking for a second, what's going on? And I remember this one patient, because this reminds me, I had a patient from NASA, very intelligent woman, rocket scientist. And she comes to see me and I just cannot lose weight, I cannot lose weight. And I say, why do you think you can't lose weight? She's like, well, the carbs. And I say, the carbs, I'm looking at her diet log, and it's like chicken, eggs, bacon. I'm like, I don't see carbs. And she said, well, I came from Ghana. Now, funny enough, I was doing research for a book, and Ghana has one of the lowest rates of obesity in the world. And she's like, in Ghana, we get together and we typically eat, a very high carb meal. And I get together with my friends from Ghana who live in Houston, and we eat meals like this. I'm like, that's why you're overweight? I was like, have you ever been back to Ghana? And she's like, yeah, I have been back to Ghana. And I was like, were people overweight there? She's like, no, I was the most overweight person. She goes, what's funny? I actually lost weight while I was back there. No. It's not that funny. It's kind of the fact because they eat a natural diet. Now, I was getting more and more overweight, and I married my wife, and I went to get a life insurance policy, and I failed miserably. My cholesterol was through the roof. I had hypertension. I had insulin resistance and a fatty liver. And I said to myself, how could I tell another patient what to do if I'm not doing it myself? I went to get an eye exam. I had cholesterol around the eye called arcus senilis. And this drove me crazy. And I said, I got to do something. And I really did go crazy. This is my dining room table. And my wife took this picture because I did not stop studying nutrition for a long, long time. And I went crazy writing this book about protein. And I'll share some of the stuff with it. One thing I did come away with, which doesn't have to do with protein, but is something that we got to keep in mind. People are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health. And they're treated by a health industry which pays no attention to food. And that, whether you're high fat, low fat, keto or not keto, you heard us today, while we disagree, we agree on this, is that food is important and we're not being fed healthy food and our doctors aren't thinking about healthy food. What does the government tell us to eat? Well, it's not that unhealthy, right? The government tells us that we should half our plate should be fruit and vegetables, a quarter of it grains, and a quarter of it protein. And that protein could be plant-based protein. That's what the government tells us. That's the now used plate. Now, what does the government spend money on? Half the plate is supposed to be fruit and vegetables. Look how much money fruit and vegetables get from the government. But meat, dairy, and eggs and sugar get a huge amount of funding. So in order to think about this, you kind of have to step outside of the box because you are fed a certain narrative over and over again, and that narrative might not be correct. So you got to think differently. What comes with a steak? Cancer, heart disease, and your choice of rice pilaf or baked potato. I think one thing we think of, I was at the store the other day and I was buying some vegetables, but then I realized that lions eat meat. So I put the vegetables back and I got meat because basically I'm a lion, right? We're lions, we're carnivores. Are we lions? Do we have canines? Are these canines? They ain't canines. Can we tear an animal apart with our claws? Do we look at roadkill and get hungry? You know, nature's kind of interesting. We are built, when you look at different animals, built pretty ideally for the environments they grow up in. A long neck for a giraffe, an anteater with its long nose, and humans are designed perfectly to eat what? Well, when you compare us, you do comparative anatomy. You have a dog? Does the dogs, yeah, I've got two myself. Do their jaws go side to side? No. They're there to clamp on, right? Our jaws go side to side to do what? Grind up food. They have more acid in their stomach than we do. They've got a short intestine. We've got a long intestine. We are what are called hindgut fermenters. Very different. We are very similar to apes, which are frugivores. And in fact, comparative anatomists say the way to best decide what you should eat should be based on your total body surface area versus the surface area of the absorptive area of your intestine. That's a lot of wording, but we become, when you look at it, frugivores, meaning we should be eating mainly fruit. This is what a frugivore diet looks like. And you'll hear a lot of people say, well, wait a second, what did paleo man eat? I love this. And then they're like, oh, paleo man definitely ate tons and tons of meat and paleo bars. Paleo man had paleo bars and brontosaurus burgers, and this is what paleo man was eating. Is this what paleo man was eating? No, it's a complete and utter fantasy. This is not, and this is a great book if you want to know what paleo man was eating. But he was not eating a lot of meat. He was not eating any dairy. And what was he eating? Well, we've evolved. We're not paleo man. There was evolution even past the paleo eras. But if you look at Australopithecus, which is a 250,000-year-old skeleton that was found, and you look at the teeth and the strontium level of the bone and everything, they were eating mainly plants. And believe it or not, they found fossilized poop, which is very bizarre to me. Can you imagine that discovery? Hey, over here, I got something. And it's fossilized poop. And what's in it? Plants. In fact, human ancestors were nearly all vegetarian. Of course, it depends where you're looking. I mean, it's going to be different if it's in the Arctic versus in the Sahara. But there is not one paleo diet. There's many, but most of them are vegetarian. He's vegetarian. Protein deficient? No. Right? The longest living and the largest mammals are actually vegetarians, for the most part. What about the blue zones? Blue zones was a study by National Geographic looking at where, if we have the lowest life expectancy, who has the most life expectancy? Who lives to 100? Now, in our mind, we're like, I don't even want to live to 100 because this is our idea of 100, right? Old and frail. But that's not what you find in these places, right? You find people that are still the matriarchs and patriarchs of their society, and they're still living good and fulfilling lives, which is part of the reason they live that long. And in looking at the secrets of these places, what are they eating and what are they doing? Well, there's a lot of things they're doing, okay? They're moving a lot. They have very strong social connections. But it is important to look at their diet. And you might say, well, carbs are bad for you. First of all, carbs, our body doesn't turn carbs to fat. I can't emphasize this enough. They've done very big studies where we overfeed carbs, and it's very hard for your body to turn a carb to fat. It's called de novo lipogenesis. They eat tons of sweet potato and tons of rice. This is what an Okinawan diet looks like. There's some meat, but it is very, very low. There is mainly carbohydrate. They get about 10 to 12% of their calories from protein. A lot of that protein is plant protein from soy. They get pork once a week. Now, when I say this is their diet, I'm talking about the older Okinawans that are now starting to die off. The younger Okinawans is a different story. They're gaining weight. Now, why are they gaining weight? We built a base in Okinawa, a military base. Those military people at that military base want what? They want McDonald's. And so do the Okinawans, because McDonald's is made to make you want it, right? It is designed by taste scientists that know what your body craves and knows how to get it to you. What about the Mediterranean, all right? What if you go to Sardinia? What are they eating there? Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of produce. They grow it. If you go to Icaria, which is an island off of Greece, it is all gardens. Everybody's got their own garden. Everybody's eating their own greens. They make their own teas. They eat tons and tons of vegetables and some seafood. I love the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They're very interesting. We were just talking about them earlier. Fascinating people. Their mindset, their religion is that the body is the temple of the soul. And you wouldn't go and defile a temple, so don't defile your body. And we were talking about the fact that they believe a lot in what you consume, all right? Whether it is mentally, whether it is physically, the food and everything. Exercise is an important part of their diet. And if you look at their lifestyle, they eat a fairly low protein diet, a very high plant-based diet. They have the longest life expectancy, and they live in America, which is the country with the lowest life expectancy. And when you look at all these blue zones together, there's something that's pretty interesting. They don't get frail, but they don't eat a lot of protein. Now, they all might eat a little bit differently. But they all eat a lot of beans, they all eat a lot of greens, they all eat a lot of vegetables, and they don't eat high protein. There's no, Atkins-type diet in any of these blue zones, and they're not frail. And Harvard did a study. They looked at their nurses since the 1980s. All the nurses had to go into the study, and they filled out food frequency questionnaires regularly, and they measured bone density, and they measured all these different factors that look at frailty. And one of the number one factors showing that someone was not going to be frail was the amount of plant protein they consumed. Plant protein, if you looked at two people and substituted the same amount of meat for plants, you could extend your lifespan by 36%, which is really impressive. And this is in an American study. The crazy thing to me is when you go on social media, it's so different. I go on social media and I see one thing. I go into scientific books and I see another. And it's always confusing to me because it's so different. This guy is all over the internet. Have you guys seen him? Stephen Gundry? He says that if you eat beans, you will die. Unless you buy his bean pill that helps you eat that bean. So if you eat that bean, you will die unless you buy his pill. Now, if we look at the blue zones, they've got many things in common, all right? Family-oriented, a lot of them have religious or belief, a purpose. Eat a predominantly plant-based diet. You know what the number one food they have in common? Beans. Beans are the number one food. And they did another separate study where they put all the studies together on all the different foods and longevity, and the number one food showing longevity was beans. And yet, to Gundry, you're going to die. No, you're not. You're going to live longer. But that's how crazy the world has become. These monkeys, okay? Which monkey is on the low-calorie diet? Which monkey's on a high-calorie diet? The monkey on the left is low calorie or high calorie? Who says low calorie? So the older looking monkey is on the higher calorie diet. The monkey that looks, and they're the same age, the monkey that looks healthy is on a low calorie fasting diet. So this started with scientists saying, okay, well maybe we are too low calorie. Could we maybe look at what it is that low calorie gets at? Is it being low calorie? Or is it something else? So they looked a little bit more specifically at rats. These are not humans, these are rats. Keep that in mind. But what they found is that if you took a low protein, high carbohydrate diet, the rat lived the longest. Why is that? Well, it might have to do with something called IGF-1 or something called mTOR. And I don't want to get into all the science, it's a little bit complicated. But because longevity researchers are studying this a lot right now. Let's look at IGF-1. So different proteins have different amino acids. Animal protein is very high in leucine. This is good to bodybuilders. They like leucine. It definitely stimulates muscle protein synthesis. It definitely stimulates IGF-1, which is a growth hormone. But it's a growth hormone to cells. And it could possibly be causing cancer. So Dr. Walter Longo, who's one of the leading researchers at USC on longevity, he found these people in Ecuador. And you can see they're very small. They do not have IGF-1 growth receptors. So they don't get effects from IGF-1. So they don't grow very tall. Now, they do not live healthy lives. They smoke, they drink, they live in poverty for the most part, but they live a pretty long life, and guess what they do not get? Cancer. They don't get cancer. And they don't get heart disease or as much heart disease and diabetes as we do. So this got him thinking, because he did those rat studies, and he looked at this culture, and then he looked at people that have the opposite, acromegaly, where you grow a lot of IGF-1 growth hormone. Remember Andre the Giant? These people get tons of cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. So he said, maybe if we limit IGF-1, we could have a benefit. So what's interesting is they did this dog aging study, because dogs are going to be a great example. They've got a closer physiology to us than rodents. They don't have a long life expectancy, especially large dogs. And guess what? Who has a large dog? Just me? A few of us. A drug is coming out next year that is probably going to make your large dog live 3 to 5 years longer. What does that drug do? It blocks IGF-1. It is going to be coming out for humans. But I've got the question, why don't we just not eat as much protein and not stimulate as much IGF-1? But I'm very excited about it because that's my boy. There's lots of issues we could go into about why protein would trigger aging in cancer. They did a very large study. It was done by the World Health Organization. They basically classify carcinogens, okay? Class 1 means it definitely causes cancer. Class 2 means it probably causes cancer. And they looked over 800 studies, and they decided that meat was a Class 1 carcinogen. Other Class 1 carcinogens, asbestos, uranium, plutonium, cigarette smoke, and meat. And yet this is what we're telling people to eat mainly. There have been multiple studies showing that if you cut back on animal protein and you increase plant protein, you decrease the amount of cancer incidence. And the EPIC study, which is a huge epidemiologic study of Europe, 10 different countries in Europe, millions of people, and if you look at the cancer incidence, so relative risk, like 1.1 means 10% increase in cancer risk, 1.2 means 20%, et cetera, and you can look at the different cancers. The red is processed meat, which we know processed meat is not good for you. You kind of accept that, right? Some people don't. Some people think bacon's good for you. Weird, but unprocessed meat we tend to think is not dangerous. And yet this is what the study is showing. The other interesting thing is prostate cancer. We have a really high prostate cancer in America compared to the rest of the world. They did a study in Harvard. I've talked with the doctors several times about the study because it just blows my mind. They looked at their health professionals and followed them out many years since the 80s. And so they had 47,000 health professionals. 2 servings of a day of dairy increased the prostate cancer risk by 60%. So they did a trial where they took a group of people with an elevated PSA and a low and a medium cancer score. So they weren't quite sure if it was cancer or not. They didn't think it needed immediate therapy. The group that went on a low protein, higher carb, plant-based diet had a drop in their PSA. The other group went straight to surgery pretty soon. Their PSA kept rising. And what was interesting is they took the blood of the people on the low protein group and they dripped it on an agar gel of prostate cancer cells, and it increased its ability to kill those cancer cells by 70%. Also had effect on telomeres. They were studying it with Elizabeth Blackwell, who's a Nobel Prize laureate, and they found that the telomere length, which this is more science, but it is a showing of possibly showing that of longevity, and they saw this lengthening of the telomere, which could mean lengthening of life. And so it was kind of an interesting study. When you look at the Seventh-day Adventists, you can see that they do have, despite living in America, a decreased risk of multiple different cancers. We've always been confused because usually plant-based diets are associated with a drop in colon cancer. Now, this is not necessarily looking at the plant-based diet, it's just looking at Seventh-day Adventists, but their colon cancer didn't reduce as much, but the other cancers did. And they also, when you start breaking down the Seventh-day Adventists to exactly what they're eating, those that were eating the lowest animal protein had the best longevity, except for pesco-vegetarians. Pesco-vegetarians did very well, so fish tended to do well. But they did these interesting studies where they break the Seventh-day Adventists up to what they eat. Are they vegan? Are they lacto-ovo? Are they pesco-ovo, semi or non? And you could see that pretty much no matter what you look at, body mass index, diabetes, heart disease, the less animal protein, the less they had. I'm going to skip that for now. So, what are the best protein sources for losing weight, right? Because we think of protein, you're always told that protein makes you lose weight. Now, going back to that EPIC study, the people that ate the least animal protein had the lowest weight. And in this study, meat consumption in a prospective study, in this EPIC study, was associated actually with weight gain more than any other factor. Weight was the number one thing. They looked at different countries all through there, and no matter what country you looked at, the amount of meat you ate correlated very positively with weight gain, which is different than what we hear. They've done multiple studies on vegetarian diets and weight loss. This was one of the best studies where they took a group of people and they were not going to calorie restrict them. We're going to say eat as much as you want of plant-based proteins, but don't eat any animal-based proteins. And this was the most weight loss in a non-calorie restricted diet they'd seen in 6 months. Now here was the interesting thing. They went back at a year and the people kept their weight off. Why? They actually enjoyed the diet. They felt like they got full pretty easily because they're eating a lot of plant food. They could eat as much as they want. There's easy ways to be an unhealthy vegetarian, like I said, Oreos or vegan. But if you're eating these foods, plant-based foods, you get full because it's got a low calorie density. It's lots of fiber. It could be what we're putting in the food too, right? And Dr. Tro kind of hit on this earlier. A chicken, when our grandparents ate a chicken, was that size and would live 6 months. Now, routinely, chickens are slaughtered at 6 weeks, and they're that size. That's got to factor into this. We're eating a lot more chicken, and it is associated with weight gain. But here's the ultimate study. These were the top nutritional researchers in the entire world, okay? These are my Michael Jordans, all right? These are who I look up to. And they were going to do the study, and I knew this way before. And I was like, I'm going to really, whatever this study shows is what I'm going to believe because it was very well done. A 2-year randomized controlled trial, blinded to the researchers, and they were going to put people on varying levels of protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Did protein lead to weight loss? No, not at all. It wasn't associated with weight loss at all. A small association with better muscle mass, but very small. Not statistically significant. Another study, they took people and they put them in, I don't know who volunteers for these crazy studies, but they put them in a hospital for a month. And they got to stay in these rooms that measure every kind of breath they take, all the moisture and everything. And they put them on like 2 weeks of a low-fat, very high-carb, plant-based diet and 2 weeks of a keto diet. You could argue whether the keto diet is what you would call a keto. Keto diets have a very wide variety of what a keto diet is. But it's kind of interesting findings because what you see is that we think that protein is satiating. There's been a lot of studies now showing protein's not any more satiating than other things. There's a study that just came out on this. But in this study, the plant-based people actually ended up eating less calories than the higher than the keto diet people. They also, you could see that the people on the animal-based protein and keto diet lost more weight, but none of that weight was fat. Because you know if you go on a keto diet, you lose water and you may lose muscle mass. Now, that's only a 2-week study. There's longer keto studies that are better than that. But it's just interesting because it's not what we had learned before about keto, which is I have a lot more respect for keto diet than I used to, but you still have to worry about the cardiovascular effects. And what we have found is that there tends to be this J-shaped curve that a very high-carb diet may not be good for you, but a very low-carb diet may not be good for you. And there's something in the middle that we should be shooting for. And I just like to make fun of meat eaters sometimes. I'm going to just skip over. Fiber to me is probably the most studied of the macronutrients, and that's something I think I see in my patients. Is I say to them, eat an apple, get some fiber. I get the food log back, and they ate a jerky stick. And I'm like, why did you eat a jerky stick? Because it's got protein, and I'm constipated. Well, that's because there's no fiber. When you're looking at how much protein do we actually need, this is kind of interesting. The RDA was done in the 1950s. It was very intense studies. They measured everything, how much nitrogen goes in, how much nitrogen goes out. They decided that the average woman needs 46 grams, average man needs 56 grams. That's way lower than you've ever heard before, right? That's the recommended daily allowance. And that was built on a normal curve, which means they went 2 standard deviations above the normal, meaning you probably needed less than that, but they wanted to make sure that whatever they recommended covered everybody. We've come to think that this is a little bit low, but that is doesn't really matter, because if we see that the typical woman needs 46 grams, she's getting 70 to 80. Actually, the latest studies are looking more like 90. And the average male needs 56, but most of them are getting 100 to 120. So we're getting our protein needs met, more than probably double what our protein needs are. When you look at older people, they did this study because they usually say as you get older, you need more protein. So they did the protein aging study. Now, this is really interesting. What they found is that you need more protein as you get older, probably along the lines of 1 gram to 1.2 grams per kilogram. But what they found was pretty interesting. If you just eat protein and you don't exercise, you don't build muscle. That's what they found. We've got this idea that if we just eat protein, it's magically going to make us gain muscle, okay? But it doesn't. So if you look at these curves, if they're doing exercise, RT, resistance training, they do get a change where you could go up on protein and get more muscle. But that curve is very blunted if you're not exercising. And really, even in trained athletes, this was in trained athletes, getting more than 1.6 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight, not of your existing body weight, doesn't get you any more muscle, even if you're training really, really hard. So I think our things are off. The other thing that people say is you're not going to absorb as much amino acids if you eat a plant-based. That this is what you're going to look like if you eat a plant-based diet, right? Is this what you look like if you eat a plant-based diet? No. We've got tons of athletes now. The #1 tennis players for a while in men's and women's were vegan. We've got bodybuilders. We've got football players, we've got all kinds of people, and there's been multiple. I could go on and on with the studies showing that animal protein and plant protein are equivalent when it comes to building muscle. All right, they are equivalent. Now, where do you get your protein? Well, I don't see anybody dying of lack of protein in my practice. Protein is everywhere. All foods have it. Even fruits have amino acids, which is really what we're looking for. People eat meat and think they'll become strong as an ox, forgetting that the ox eats grass. You could get it from grass. So where do I get mine? From fruits and vegetables. Vegetables, even broccoli, has 45% protein. It's going to have the amino acids you need. Obviously, you're going to probably have to eat more of it to get more protein, but you don't need to get these super high amounts of protein. Beans and legumes tend to be the best source. I'm very big on soy for my post-bariatric patients. Tofu goes down really easy. Don't look grossed out because you guys haven't cooked it correctly. If you cooked it correctly, you would love it. And it's very easily absorbed. It doesn't cause stomach upset for most people. And people do really well with it. This is a standard American diet. You can see that most people get about 125 grams of protein, 2,500 calories. One of the top researchers in the world decided to do his vegan diet. And this is what his diet looked like, breakfast of oatmeal, God forbid. You could see what he ate. This is his protein. He only got 78 grams of protein, but that's well above what he needed. He says he doesn't do resistance training. And he went and actually checked all his amino acid intake, and he got enough amino acids and everything. So what else did he get? All these other great things that come with plant-based protein, along with the fiber. So all I'm asking is that you give peas a chance. I'm going to end this because I'm going long here. Changing to a plant-based diet changed my life, right? I really became much healthier. Cholesterol dropped, blood pressure dropped. I became very healthy and started doing races with it. It gave me energy, gave me power, and it's helped my patients. Here's one of my patients who said, if I lose weight and go on he was a cowboy, right? He was like, I'm not eating that plant-based stuff. He goes, if I eat this plant-based stuff, you got to do a triathlon with me when I lose my weight. And I was like, okay, here we are crossing the finish line. And there he is. There's a lot of information out there. It's hard to tie it together. I hope I was able to give you some knowledge and a little bit of wisdom, and happy to answer questions as we go through. We're also going to give away some of my product too. Are we going to do that right now? Can I answer questions, or are we?
We are going to do the giveaway because our next session is starting in about 2 minutes. So
okay. I'll do 2 minutes worth of questions. Yeah. Yes. Right. So, oh, there's a lot. Yeah. The- right. Right. So there is a book called Vegan for Dummies, and it has a really great protein section on how to make protein. There's actually a lot of good cookbooks. I love tofu in that situation. It goes down so easily in my patients. It is a very complete protein. So they talk about plants being incomplete protein. They're not incomplete. They all have all the amino acids just at lower levels. So you hear about food combining. You don't really need to combine them at each meal, but you do want to get a variety of food. But I find soy being really good, beans being really good, nuts and seeds, pumpkin seeds are excellent. The other thing is I don't tell my patients to eat 80 to 90 grams of protein. So I'm telling my patient to eat 60 grams of protein. So they get that pretty easily. In the very early phases, we do use protein shakes. I'm not a lover of protein shakes. You might have seen in the Consumer Reports 2 days ago the high level of lead in all of these. Which, by the way, mine is tested. There's not lead in it. Well, we're checking it. We're double checking it to make sure there's not lead. But ours comes from Costa Rica farms. Most of them are coming from China. When you're getting these protein powders. So I'm not pushing high protein in my patients, so they're not struggling to get protein. And you know what? I check everybody's muscle mass, and they're not losing muscle mass. They're doing great with it. So the combination of soy milk and tofu and beans and an occasional protein shake easily gets them their 60 grams.
And you're not, so there's a very high level of breast cancer in my family, so we were always supposed to stay away.
The opposite, the absolute opposite. So I also do breast cancer surgery. If someone has breast cancer, I'm like, please overconsume soy. All right? Yes. Every study. People, there is something called open evidence. All right? It is an AI bot that studies all of the research. Anything I've told you here, look it up on open evidence. All right? Look it up. Look up oatmeal and health on open evidence. Please.
All right.
It is, even in ER positive patients, soy is a phytoestrogen. It's a partial antagonist agonist, so it works a little bit like tamoxifen. But they've shown in people that have had breast cancer, there was a huge study, they looked at breast cancer patients, and soy actually prevented cancer recurrence.